I think what we see is that traditionally COP is a political negotiation and business is somewhat removed from that, but we are seeing a big momentum from businesses, investment sector saying we have a strong view on what type of climate change deal is needed, we need a price on carbon, and that voice is really growing. So we do see increasing numbers of businesses coming to COP and engaging with policymakers on what's required for the market to be successful at delivering a low carbon economy.
Are we seeing the right businesses being involved? Is there a case for more engagement from progressive, what is often called progressive business companies that are very keen on reporting their emissions and cutting their environmental footprint?
And it's a key question. I think historically we've seen a lot of businesses who fear carbon policy and carbon prices have obviously been lobbying quite strongly to avoid their business being damaged. That's kind of rational behaviour in a sense. But we are seeing the progressive businesses, those who say sustainability is critical, it's critical to the future of our business success, and we need policy. And that voice is really growing. There's a quiet part of business that sort of says, well, is this really that much to do with us? We'll just stay quiet. And I think the key thing now is for everyone who sees avoiding dangerous climate change to be important for the future of their business, to stand up and say that.
I mean, ultimately it all comes down to the figures, and the CDP produce a number of really interesting reports on an annual basis focusing on what companies are saying about their own businesses. Do you get the sense that as your sort of coverage of different businesses around the world expands, are you getting a sense that companies are becoming more engaged with issues and making more evidence, or are you just getting more evidence that companies are just not actually doing that much with regards to cutting their footprint?
So there's no doubt that companies have become far more engaged in addressing climate change. In 2003, we had 245 companies reporting CDP. Now we've got 4,500 companies from all around the world. We see those numbers also increasing in emerging markets like Brazil, South Africa, India and China. So companies, large corporations globally realise climate change is crucially important to the future of their business. They need to be measuring their emissions, developing a strategy to reduce those, developing new low carbon products and services. And there's significant momentum there. What we need is the policy framework to really push that momentum much faster.
So what kind of policy framework are you talking about? What do you think is needed?
I think the absolute key thing we need is a carbon price. We've obviously seen that developed in some regions, some countries. It's been a bit bumpy along the road, but there's been some successes. But what we need is at the COP to agree and move forward towards creating a carbon price across all the large economies globally and making sure that's linked. That's the key policy that would change business and investment decisions.
Do you have an idea of what that price would be?
There's lots of research out there saying what's the right price. So the UK government says the social cost of a tonne of carbon is £70. So ultimately we have to be heading somewhere in that direction if we really want to avoid market externalities being passed on to society. In the short term, a carbon price of say 30 to 40 euros in Europe would start to shift fuels from coal to gas and lower carbon fuels like renewables.
I mean, is a carbon price going to come as part of an expansion of carbon trading around the world? You were part of the Clean Development Mechanism, sort of an overseeing board last year looking at how that particular carbon trading market had fared and what were the sort of issues, underlying problems behind it. But do you sense that is what's going to be required to sort of link all these markets together?
And then what we see at the moment is the increasing number of countries and regions are developing cap and trade schemes that's creating a carbon price. California has done so this year, Korea is doing so next year, China's got a couple of pilot schemes up and running and is planning a national scheme. So this is all really positive progress. That's happening in the national way. There are some discussions about linkage. So California is going to link with Quebec, the EU is talking about linking. And what we need for that linkage is the infrastructure, the knowledge, the methodologies that were created under the Clean Development Mechanism to be used so that we can really get accurate linking very quickly.
It doesn't seem like it's an issue. I mean, is this being discussed at the COP? I mean, it's not one of the headline issues that people have talked about in the past week. Are the sort of concepts of a carbon price, as you understand it, or linking these trading schemes, are they even being debated inside the plenary sessions?
So I think no, not at COP. It's not on the agenda enough. It should be on the agenda far more. What the positive things what happen is there are a number of bilateral conversations between certain countries who are already committed or developing carbon change schemes, and they are talking to each other. And I think, in a sense, these things are developed in different ways, and it's developing very much that way from the bottom up in terms of individual national countries, rather than from the COP process down. But the two have to merge and come together.
In terms of going back to one of the core sort of roles of the CDP, which is to sort of almost drive the idea of sort of corporate sustainability reporting, environmental reporting, do you find when companies eventually take that step, I guess it's a bit like going up into your loft and finding what's been up there and moving about, but do you find that once they actually get stuck into the process, positives come out of it? Because I guess a lot of them are scared that they may find things that they won't even be able to solve in terms of sort of systemic problems.
We do very much, and we know that the companies who are measuring and reporting CDP are learning as they do so. So if companies measure their greenhouse gas emissions, then they can start to manage them. And some very good examples, Walmart thought the greatest source of their emissions was from their trucking fleet. When they measured their emissions, they discovered it's from leaking refrigerants, and they can solve that much easier. They can't track the trucks off the road, but they can fix their leaking refrigerants. We also see that leading companies, so at CDP we rank companies on their disclosure and performance, and we say these are the leaders, those taking the most action. They're providing better financial returns than the average benchmark. So the performance leaders in CDP created 29% total financial return, better than the benchmark from 2010 to 2013.
And give people an idea who these leaders are. Are there any companies you'd pick out?
Yeah, there's a whole range. We have about 50 companies in that leadership index, from Walmart, Unilever, HSBC, number of financial services companies. So it's a broad range of companies across all sectors, and that's what we see, that every sector has companies who are more advanced than others. And what investors are very interested in is saying, look, which companies are going to be the winners and losers from the transition to a low carbon economy, from new climate change policies, and then to look at that leadership index as these companies are most likely, not certainly, to be the winners.